All right, Duane, appreciate you taking some time and joining us today. And of course, my son's going to call. He calls me every single Monday morning during this evening Christmas.
We're talking about AI. He knows.
Well, he knows.
Throw
Yeah.
him on it.
All right, so a lot of stuff to go over, but most of us got the announcement last week about a district judge in Texas found FinCEN to be unconstitutional. And I think the operative term here is so it's just on pause right now.
That's correct, yeah. So for those of you that don't know, FinCEN is a effort by the federal government to curb money laundering in the real estate world. And
because I was looking for other creative ways to launder my money, and
good,
but now I'm back.
Well, there's a wash machine in the dryer. Just throw it in there and launder it.
I asked ChatGPT. Okay, now that FinCEN's a law, how do I launder my money?
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
I know. But anyway, and yet there was a lot of hoopla about when that was going to go into effect and what the results were. From a real estate perspective, all we need to know is talk to our client, say this is a law that went into place. It's now on hold. We don't have any, as a realtor or a licensee, we have no responsibility for any of the reporting or none. That's all done at the title company level for the most part. Mm-hmm. And so we just have to inform them that if they're in certain situations, they may have to comply with this FinCEN once it becomes adjudicated through the court system. And
I'm predicting it will. I mean, it's some form. They got to go back because in its current condition, it's found unconstitutional. It's not like the government's going to go, oh, it's unconstitutional, so let's just forget this idea.
Correct. Yes, that is very true. And so it'll get adjudicated through the system, and at some point, some version of it will likely be in our world. And all we have to do is educate our client enough to know that, hey, we may have to participate with it, but try not to go into deep details on it because there's so many moving parts. It's not our role.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Kyle wanted us to talk about this, the seller originated offers. And for instance, a lot of this would be used when you have an unrepresented buyer.
That's the only time.
Yeah, exactly.
But who's Kyle? Oh, I guess I know who he is.
Yeah. I hope so.
Seller originated sales. So this is an effort that we struggled with for a long time. When this new buyer broker, I guess I can't really call it new anymore, but when the buyer broker agreement became an obligation that we had to do, especially like in open houses and situations, sign calls where the party that's interested in the property was not represented. How do we handle that? And we went through a bunch of gyrations in the industry, and the latest version now is when an unrepresented buyer comes to that property and shows an interest in doing it, how does the listing agent handle that? AAR and their attorneys came together with the what they call a seller-originated offer. And I know that's a hard concept for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, and it's not perfect, but it's what the industry is using now. So when that buyer expresses an interest, the seller can actually, through the listing agent, draft an offer to present to the seller. There's a form that's two different provisions on the additional clause addendum that needs to be attached to that seller-originated offer. The additional clause addendum is line 70 and line 85. Both need to be checked. And they deal with the time for acceptance when the buyer has to review that offer and respond to it. And they also deal with notifications. Those two paragraphs deal with the notifications and how, when notices are given out to either party, who gets those. And when the buyer is unrepresented, the notice has got to go to the buyer, right? Not to their agent. So that form is very, very important to it. The process is a little bit cumbersome.
Are we talking about a separate offer, like a separate contract? or still using the regular real estate purchase contract with the additional clause addendum?
It's the same residential resale purchase contract, and it's just the
I was going to say, I didn't know how that one slipped by me, that we got a whole brand new contract.
No, it's the same contract. It's just originated from the seller to the buyer versus vice versa. So, and with those two provisions and the additional clause addendum, it works. Typically, there will be some conversation with that buyer. This is what I want to offer. This is my down payments and so forth. But technically, the way it's supposed to work is the seller can make whatever offer they want to the buyer, and then the buyer would review that. Where the challenge comes in is if the buyer doesn't like what the seller sent to him, how does the buyer counteroffer? Well, in our traditional world, we have the counteroffer form that we can originate. But you're not supposed to share those documents with a non-realtor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are trademarked and copyrighted to the realtor world. So the way the attorneys have advised us as brokers is if that seller originates an offer to the buyer and the buyer chooses that they don't like that, they want to modify the terms, you have to start all over. And basically that first offer goes away and you draft a subsequent offer from the seller to the buyer. And you keep doing that process over and over again until you get to an agreement, which is like I said, it's not perfect, but that's the way it works. And and I can tell you, we've had success in doing it. We've had agents that have had, surprisingly, a number of.
So now you're making me want to do dual agency.
And I get it.
No, I'm just kidding.
And I get it. I mean, that's not something we recommend as a single agent, dual agent. But yeah, I get it. And it's just one of those things that you have to weigh the benefits versus.
Right.
A lot of buyers are unrepresented by choice, right? They think they want to be able to negotiate a better deal than they can. They don't want to have to sign that buyer broker agreement and agree to pay their agent. So it works. The first time you do it as an agent, when you're on the listing side, it's a little bit of a challenge to wrap your mind around it. So reach out to your broker team.
How much am I permitted to question the buyer of, okay, what type of loan are you getting? What type of earnest money are you thinking? What type of down payment are you thinking?
I don't have a problem with you asking those kind of questions because they are important to their information you can relay to your seller. It doesn't mean that that's what the seller has to put on their offer when they send it to the buyer, right? It's just like a buyer's agent questioning you as a listing agent. What's the seller looking for? What's important to them? What do they want, right? Similar type of thing. So that's it. But you're going to run into that every once in a while. So reach out to us and we'll help you through it.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about and what you sent over these are like the questions that the broker hotline and are popular questions you guys are getting, and
correct. Yeah.
And this is statewide. This is just not West USA.
This is mostly West USA stuff.
Okay.
It is mostly West USA stuff. And by the way, AI is what helped me come up with these. We as you know.
Oh, I'm back. All right.
So when an agent calls into the broker support line, you'll get a little prompt that says AI is taking notes. That's for this purpose. We use those notes to kind of know where our agents are having questions, where they're having, and how we can help schedule some of our training and so forth. So.
All right, so let's talk about buyer-broker agreements and compensation. So what does an agent do if the buyer has already signed a buyer-broker agreement with another agent? I'm just assuming that, there's a lot of different ways that you can take it. I mean, I could have them sign a buyer-broker agreement with the understanding that they might be paying two agents, and if they're okay with that, that's okay. But I can't be giving them instructions on how to cancel the buyer-broker agreement with the other agent. You don't want to not have this discussion and have them sign one with you, and then they don't know the potential ramifications.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I'll tell you the reality of it is a lot of times there's a couple of scenarios. One of them is the client comes to you and says, hey, I'm not happy with my agent and I want to work with you. And one of the first questions most agents will ask is, well, are you working with somebody? Well, yes, I'm not happy with them. So the question shouldn't be, are you working with somebody? The question should be, have you signed an exclusive employment agreement with another realtor? The reason that that's important is because we have the buyer, we're going to talk about a little bit of buyer-broker agreement to show property, right? And that's not an exclusive agreement. So if a person comes to you and says, yes, I've signed a exclusive agreement, it's pretty much hands off at that point. You really cannot ask them to sign a buyer-broker agreement, and even if they're willing to pay you, potentially 2 different commissions, the reason is your code of ethics. Code of ethics says you cannot work with somebody who is under an exclusive agreement, both listing side and buy side. So that would be a violation. If you know that they've signed an exclusive agreement with another agent, you got to be hands off until that either gets canceled or expired.
Okay.
One or the other. If the client doesn't know what they've signed, say, yeah, maybe I signed something, I don't know what it was. That's, you got to go with the idea that was an exclusive agreement. Hands off until you can find out for sure what kind of an agreement it was they signed, and if it is an exclusive, they have to work with their agent and their agent's broker to resolve that before you can get involved.
And so what I typically do in these situations, now I'm telling you what I do, so is say, okay, I appreciate that. You don't know exactly what you signed. Send me over what you signed and let me review it and tell you what you signed.
Yeah, and that you can do that. And the only thing you can't do is when they ask you, well, how do I get out of this? You got to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. You have to go to your agent and their
that's
broker.
what I say.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the way. The next question that we're going to talk about is that showing agreement, the buyer-broker agreement to show. If it's a buyer-broker agreement to show, that's not an exclusive agreement, and you do have the right to be able to work with them, to have them sign either an exclusive agreement or another buyer-broker agreement to show. So it depends on that document.
Yeah.
What that document is as to how you're going to proceed, So it's don't automatically assume that you can go to work for them. Automatically assume that you can't until you figure out what they've got.
All right. And then obviously, can I proceed if they say the prior agreement doesn't matter? Their opinion on it doesn't matter.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, the fact that the client says that they want you to proceed anyway, don't buy into that. It's a problem waiting to happen, and so, yeah.
Question in the chat from an agent is, can the agent that's having a conversation with the client ask for what they have signed already? So can they see it?
That's what I said. Yeah.
You can do that, absolutely. Once you review it, if it's an exclusive agreement, you just got to take hands-off approach.
All right. So this next one, do buyers risk owing to agents? So let's just say I fail to ask you if you've signed something, okay? And then I have you sign a buyer-broker agreement and then proceed, get into contract, and have a closing. Now, I know that my bad for not asking you, but in that situation, do buyers risk the possibility of owing to commissions? Or does the original buyer-broker agreement trump mine?
No. The buyer actually risks 2 different compensations to 2 different brokers. In fact, we've collected on one of those where we were the first buyer-broker agreement. The client went off, signed a different one with a different agent, closed on a deal, and we actually collected for the first guy. So it happens, but your point about you failed to ask, that's technically a code of ethics violation. We are required by our realtor code to ask, are you under an exclusive employment agreement? So,
Okay.
Yep.
All right, boy, we all love post-possession and possession timings and so forth.
Yep.
Is the post-possession period acceptable for you?
I'll be honest with you. For 40 years or thereabouts as a broker, I always had a opinion that pre-possession and post-possession were a problem waiting to happen. right? And nothing good could come out of them. And there are some horror stories, just like in any real estate transaction. But at the end of the day, when COVID come around and the market really heated up and the sellers wanted those post possessions for the most part, we modified our stance on it and produced a document that's a short-term post-possession agreement. And I can tell you that we have not had any significant problems. Few problems, but nothing real significant. So the answer to your question, is the post-possession period acceptable? Yes, it is. And I'm still surprised at how many of them I see in today's market. It's more of a balanced market, not tipped heavily towards the seller, but yet we're still having buyers give a post possession to the seller when we're on either side of the deal.
So then, is there a maximum, allowable days? Because this can become very tricky. One, at what point do we need a lease agreement as opposed to our post-possession agreement? And then what do the HOAs say about short-term?
Yep.
Because now you have a lease agreement for less than said period of time, and the HOA catches wind, and that could be problematic.
Yes, it can. Yeah, and so it is a balancing act. There is no doubt about it. When we drafted our short-term post-possession agreement, we had obviously consulted with our attorneys, and we capped that at 90 days. So up to 90 days, we can use that short-term post-possession agreement. Anything over that, we are recommending that you go into a lease agreement. Part of that has to do with lender requirements as well, because oftentimes a buyer has to take possession within a certain period of time, not to be in violation of their if they're doing an owner-occupied financing, right? So part of it has to do with lending. Part of it has to do with HOA stuff. So we just picked 90 days. Is that a magic number? No, not really, but it's where we think we can defend it from a contractual standpoint, easy enough to be that. So, but I will tell you, most post-possession agreements are less than 30 days, about 30 days.
And I want to emphasize, I love page 8 of the contract. You can do all kinds of very creative stuff.
You can,
but I don't think that page 8 is the place to negotiate the terms of post-possession.
Correct. No,
and it's important for our agents to understand we have a post-possession document on the dashboard.
We do, and oftentimes I'll see in offers where there is a counter offer that comes back and says the seller wants a post-possession agreement. That's fine, and they try to outline some terms in a counteroffer as well, and that's not so good. If you're not able to negotiate that terms of that post-possession during your the initial offer, in other words, it wasn't submitted with as part of the initial offer, let's just put language in that counteroffer or the initial offer that says that the terms of the offer is contingent upon the buyer and seller entering into a post-possession agreement during the due diligence period.
Yeah.
So we've got that 10-day window to negotiate that possession, and that contingency. Then, if they aren't able to come to terms, that contingency fails and the contract goes away.
All right, and then the last one. So we do a 30-day post-possession, and both parties realize it's going to need another 15 days. Is that simply fixed with an addendum?
Yeah, you could do it that way.
And are we still involved as far as agency goes?
I'd like to say no, but probably so.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd probably have to be involved with that to a certain degree. Where we're not going to be involved is in disputes between buyer and seller when the move out happens and so forth. That's between them.
All right, file cleanup. All right, so let's just say we've got issues with names and check boxes and so forth. But this is an interesting question. So if title clears it, do we still need an addendum?
So here's the thing. From a audit perspective, as a broker from the Department of Real Estate, when they come and do an audit of us, they're going to ask to probably pull 100 of our files, just random files, right? And so one of the things they're going to look for is the settlement statement versus the contract. And when the names don't match, our staff is reviewing that. And unfortunately, we don't get paperwork on it until we get the settlement statement. And it's, John and Joe Smith bought the property as the buyers in here, but at the closing, it was XYZ LLC because we don't have anything that says why is XYZ the buyer on this property, or vice versa. The seller is John and Joe Smith, and the seller is now the trust of John and Joe Smith, right? And so those have to match. And isn't it the fact that the title company cleared that means they have some documentation that allowed them to do that. We just need a copy of that documentation.
Yeah.
And sometimes an addendum is going to be necessary, but to me, it would be rare that would be the situation.
Well, and so it's interesting. Just like I was helping an agent with their first contract over the weekend, and names popped up because I go, well, what we have to do is for the buyers. I simply I go by what's on the PQ. Okay. The lender's done their due diligence. And you know, you may know the person is Joey, but I'm not putting Joey on the contract unless the PQ says Joey.
Sure.
And then on the flip side, I can't depend on the listing agent putting the right information. So I'm simply on the seller creating a contact in there, and I'm going. The only thing I can go by at this point is what's in Monsoon.
Right, what's in the tax record, and so. And that's fair enough, and I know that's how we get to where we're at when we have a discrepancy. But just understand that we need to get them matched up somehow between the settlement statement and that. And I know it's a pain, and I know it's not something that happens early in the transaction. It's usually last minute after it's already closed, and it's a pain. So we work with you as best as we can, but just know and understand that this is basically because of the auditing process of the Department of Real Estate.
All right, so I've got a listing and it cancels.
Yep.
And now the seller wants to relist with me.
Okay.
Can I revive? I mean, I know the answer, but can I revive it with an addendum? Can I just use the same old stuff that I've had? And I would say about the only thing that you can use are the pictures.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. You're going to get a new MLS number. You're going to have to do all new listing documentation. And so whenever there's a cancellation, that terminates that whole agreement. So you can't revive it with just an addendum.
I've done this once, very embarrassing, but way back, I lost track of the listing expiration date and woke up the next day going, okay, my listing expired yesterday.
Yep.
In today's current rules and so forth, can I in that point revive it with some sort of addendum, or I'm now starting brand new?
Our policy is you're going to start brand new.
And good luck having that conversation with your client, your seller.
Your client, yeah.
And it didn't go well with me.
It probably did. And I've got one this weekend as well, where the opposite happened. The agent had a conversation with their seller, getting ready to expire. Do you want to extend it? Yeah, well, we'll extend it. Great. She jumped on the MLS, extended it in MLS, but didn't do any kind of paperwork on our side. Didn't do any signed listing addendum for that extension. And all of a sudden, she's asking her TC for another extension, and it's expired back in January, end of December. Well, how come we're doing an extension of a listing that's already expired 3 months ago? Oh, no, it didn't expire. And so now we got to go back and try to resolve that. So you cannot use the old agreement. Anytime it's canceled, it is what it is.
All right.
So,
hold on. Back up. All right. Disclosures, forms, and approved tools. Yeah. All right. So, I know what Breeze is. I'm personally, I don't like it. Like,
Okay.
and it's just me personal preference.
Yep.
It takes me a lot longer personally when I'm selling my own property than just printing out
A blank
the
form.
spuds
Yep.
and
Yeah.
and just
Yep.
handwriting and so forth.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fair enough. And you know that Breeze is basically a online software through SkySlope that AAR has authorized for realtors to use when sellers want to use an electronic procedure to fill out the SPDS. So you can access Breeze through your AAR online process. It works fine. It's not as I'm kind of with you. I'd rather print it out and
I can
and
skip
do it.
stuff.
What? But at the end of the day, if you do have clients that would rather do it electronically, that service is available. It is locked down very tightly, so only the owners would have access to being able to fill out the questionnaire on the SPDS. That's the beauty of it. If you just send it over to them in a fillable PDF, you know, anything could happen there. So that's why Breeze is in place for that. So, yeah, you can use it.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
All right. Well, we got a little bit of time, but anything else you want to talk about, or let's just go get a cocktail early?
Yeah, we might be able to go get a cocktail. I mean, look, I am really proud of our agents and how they're performing. Our company's doing well. We're looking forward to our awards thing coming up this week, right? So we'll all be there. And
all right, well, that leads to another question.
Uh-oh.
Anything on the horizon that we as agents don't know about that could impact our business? For instance, like the SCA and the lawsuit and all that. Is there something that's on the horizon that we may not be privy of that would benefit?
Probably. There's always something on the horizon. I will tell you that the buyer broker agreement issue was all over a litigation that happened on the seller side of a transaction. There is a movement for a class action thing on the buyer side. It's not getting much traction, but there is still that potential out there that there could be another round of litigation against the industry for compensation issues. So that, you know, how that'll play out. Personally, I don't think it's going to go very far, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't get to do that. You know, there's some changes at the MLS level. For those that don't know, Matt Consalvo, our CEO, has announced his retirement.
Oh.
So he'll be replaced. He's given the organization about a year and a half until he'll be 2027 sometime. He'll be out, I believe.
Is that the job you said you were applying for, Nick?
That was a secret, Mike.
Not anymore.
Yeah. And the Armless Board of Directors is in the process of doing a complete makeover and change. So they are now going to have a board consisted of mostly a fiduciary board is what it's going to be called, that will be responsible for the operations of the Armless entity. And then they'll have and the current board of directors will be moved off into a advisory role. Part of the issues around all that was, you know, the lawsuits that came through on this had allegations in them that said that you have a bunch of competitors sitting around the board of directors table making rules against, you know, that are all competitors in the marketplace and making rules that could be antitrust in nature. And so to alleviate some of those concerns, we've moved away from, or they will be moving away from, the current structure of the board of directors to one that is now with won't be able to have a license in Arizona, and you'll be in the real estate space, but you won't be that. So you know how that plays out, I don't know. I think it's going to be positive. I supported it. So I think it will be good. I think the organization running as more of a business type organization is good. So yeah, but that's those are a couple of things locally that I know that are happening, and I'm sure there's more.
Right.
You know.
All right.
So it's always a moving target.
All right, Duane, appreciate it as always. Great stuff. And I'll leave you with the quote of the day: courage is mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Mark Twain. Appreciate everybody joining us. Go out and sell a home.